students from China here on visas that come from what are known as, I believe, the Seven Sisters of Army and Defense universities in China, therefore high risk programs. And so to do a big jump cut, when we see the level of technology that's being used by Israel against Iran in the war that broke out, Thursday night for us in the West, the level of activity from Chinese students in North American universities that can be dual use weapons. So we're talking AI, drones, anything you can think of. China is sucking that out of Canada and the United States right now in programs similar to the agro-terror sort of allegation program at U Michigan.
Sam Cooper, my brother, we are back in action. I am sans my bureau hat. My wife stole it, and I spent 20 minutes racing around my house trying to find it. However, it is currently on her head, so I am sorry, brother. I had every intent of wearing it today.
There you go. Well, look, I'm back in the bunker today, and I'll, without disclosing too much, someone else has the prime office space. So we're both on the same end of something today. Maybe
we're both victims of marriage. This is single man. This is what happens. This is where this all goes.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Sam's in a broom closet, and I'm wearing an old hat. So there we go. Yeah. So, Sam, dude, so much to cover, man. It's like we don't talk for a couple of weeks, and then a million things happen, and it's like
wars start.
Yeah, the plans change like immediately. Like I wanted to talk about that timeline of misinformation, leading into the Canadian election, but there's just so much else that I feel like we have to cover. And yeah. I want to start with the story of the recent releases from the FBI reporting that deadly pathogens had been brought into the United States from China by Chinese scientists. Dude, as bad as this stuff is, as terrible as this all is, the silver lining to it all is that we get a better and clearer understanding of how accurate you have been for years.
When you said that, it's interesting because I'm going through, I talk to lawyers a lot, and I'll be very polite, but there was a circle of lawyers in Vancouver that were pushing back hard and for a long time on my Vancouver model reporting. And, it led to an inquiry. They were all proven wrong and deeply wrong. They continue to be proven wrong. And I'd like to say, I know there's people in law offices, both, professors and practicing corporate. There's people in banks. There's people in government worldwide now that support the reporting. And yet I continue to get pushback on things like when I talk with you or Mark Cahotis saying his inflammatory Arctic Mexico rhetoric. And I tell people, look, I don't adopt everything you say. I don't adopt what Mark says. I'm very clear that my reporting is my reporting. And then I talk to people that are critical and free thinkers, and we explore things. And of course, the lawyers that have something to hide and something to gain, maybe gain, maybe at that, we'll come out and we'll try to attack me for it. But then FBI's, director comes out and says, hey, look, Vancouver is being used by the Chinese Communist Party, Mexican cartels, Iranian organized crime. I'll do a story about a buried potential ISIS threat related to carfentanil in Toronto, later proven accurate. And so, yeah, to what you said, look, I'm always going to keep pushing and digging. There will always be pushback, but I get the sense that, let's just say, I'm finding higher and strategic ground, and the people that have been pushing back, there'll be an answer for them in the coming years. A forceful answer. But from day to day, yeah. Kash Patel, agroterrorism. I've talked about how those allegations at the University of Michigan uh, are so reminiscent of what happened in the Winnipeg Lab. So we can go anywhere on that. We can go on cartels using indigenous land on the border between, United States and Canada, and how cartels, yes, contrary to what you'd read in the Globe and Mail or CBC, are using Canada and using Canada egregiously and increasingly. So yeah, I can go anywhere, but I wanted to agree with you that, yeah, day by day, week by week, I do think, the public is getting traction on realizing that groundbreaking reporting was true, accurate, and important.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of go back to something that you said here, because I think you made an important point, right? Like the fact that, people get uptight about, you or me talking to people that they may not completely agree with is kind of indicative of what's happened within within Western society in general now, where we've been driven to extremes. So if you don't overlap on everything, it's like you can't talk to that person. And
Yeah,
like you and I don't agree on everything. But,
yeah, we agree. I would say, coming from Vancouver, not to cut you off, both directly experiencing as young men, seeing what was going on, me and my way, you living more directly in the middle of it.
Yeah.
As we said before, both of us being as younger men, economically, politically formed by what we faced and swimming upstream. I said, and I think you agree, we were at the front end of the curve of what the younger generations in Canada have now been energized by.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was valid experience. And now we're sharing it. I don't always agree with you. I certainly don't always agree with Mark. Everyone has their interests, but I come down, this isn't my entry point to public discourse, but I agree with you that whole thing about, oh, you I don't know, put a bookmark on a tweet from someone I don't agree with.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're canceled because they're bad and I don't like them. Yeah, that's bad. On the other hand, I'll say right now, not to get off track, but going too far, there's certain people that I'd put, a million miles between myself and them, and always will, because I do think something's crossed the line. But I'm glad we're getting back into a space where people that may have insights that come from a different space are engaging with each other.
Well, it's the only way we find solutions. And I think that's kind of what's been the monkey wrench in public discourse for the last 10 or so years, is that we can't talk to people that we don't completely agree with. In fact, I prefer to talk to people that I disagree with on almost all levels, because it's through those conversations that the revelations happen. The problem is I can't get them to come on this podcast. And when I talk to them privately, normally the conversation is interrupted by them screaming in my face and that I'm a Nazi or something, right? And that's and we've hit this. We're in this like critical point or critical period of extremism where we just can't talk to each other anymore unless you're preaching to the choir. And it's sad.
What they called in my University of Toronto intro philosophy class is dialectic discourse, right? So someone that you may not agree with, but if you have an open mind of discovery through that jostle or fencing, if you want to call it, respectfully as possible, you may even come to reassess some of your viewpoints and strengthen them, which should be good for you. So yeah, as much as possible, everyone, I mean, if I learned anything in philosophy class, that was one of the good points.
For sure. So let's pivot and talk about this imported pathogen story, because and we're going to get to the Winnipeg Lab because there's a connection here. And Sam, so let's just break this down. FBI Director Kash Patel released a series of reports detailing pathogens that were imported into the United States by Chinese scientists working at American research facilities. Sam, can you break down what happened, key names, key events, what these pathogens were, whatever you have off the top of your head right now, because I know there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So I'm going to get the names wrong, but I'll get the backgrounds right. So There's early June, a couple, that is apparently or purportedly, a boyfriend and a girlfriend who study at a university in China. Uh, they've between a university in Texas and most importantly, the University of Michigan, there's been a history for the past 2 years that we've just learned about with a DOJ indictment unsealed, that as a couple they've been bringing in what is called elements that lead to a potential agricultural bioweapon. Like I'm gonna just not even try to search my mind for the compound's name, but basically a mushroom or a fungus that can be released into fields of wheat and wreck them. So this would be I'll get into the scheme, but this would be something from the DOJ statements and Patel and others that could suggest that if Taiwan and China become a kinetic war, and if America gets into it, China may be working on something for down the line where they could have that agent in a lab in America, and one of their agents can release it. And, that is a way of attack from the inside, biowar. And so to get to the scheme, what was released showed that the female, who is a Chinese Communist Party member, and documents from her seized from her phone showed that as many students have to, if not all, to get funding from the Chinese Communist Party, which is everyone in universities in China, to get funding, they have to do a pledge loyalty to the party. And so this feeds into Xi Jinping's national security structure. And that means if someone in the army or the MSS or whatever entity in China says, you're going to the University of Michigan, you're going to use that lab and work with ABC, who's already in the United States, to work on this potential agro weapon, you do it. Further to that case, the boyfriend or the girlfriend, don't hold me to that, was also had access to a university in Texas. And there was sort of back and forth going on for years. The woman or the boyfriend had already smuggled materials in. And so, finally they're arrested in early June at, I believe, Detroit airport. And they lie about what they're bringing in and how it's, involved in the lab. And so they're charged, under national security laws. A week later, another female is caught at Detroit airport. Again, she's coming into the University of Michigan lab with a different, is it a potential pathogen or something that she's working on at the same time in China. I don't know if those two cases directly fit together. It looks pretty plausible that there's a network running, right, secret materials from China into that lab, working on them. And again, it could be just to benefit China's scientific research, stealing intellectual property, using American facilities, or, there could be that warfare element. And then, of course, that automatically the fact that it's a couple, a man and a woman working together in the Michigan lab, suggested to me the Winnipeg Lab case, that we had a purported husband and wife. They may be agents put together to come to Canada, for all we know, because there's precedent for that in other cases in California.
And British Columbia.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is happening across the world and in North America. So a relationship may not be, the relationship that you understand. It could be just a spy relationship that goes in different directions. But so, we've talked about how the Winnipeg lab was used egregiously for Dr. Chu, the woman, an Order of Canada recipient, I believe, who had a high honor, from Canada's Governor General, who'd been in Canada's system for years. She's secretly working on weaponizing Ebola, according to CSIS documents that had to be released. And meanwhile, as we discussed, while no evidence of any type indicates she sent anything related to bat filovirus research from the Winnipeg lab that we know of, and there's no suggestion she did, she was simultaneously working on the bat virus program with controversial scientists, from Wuhan that we all know, those of us that follow the story, and ones in the United States as well. And as we know now, Western intelligence believes that what they were working on, including what Dr. Chu intellectually was working on, is part of what leaked out of the Wuhan lab and caused the pandemic. So this is going on across Canadian universities, I'm going to assert, if not always on a scientific biological level, on a theft of intellectual property, on a dual use, civilian military technology. I've done another report about so many programs at the Metropolitan University of Toronto and University of Toronto, my alma mater, where there's scientific programs where you have students from China here on visas that come from what are known as, I believe, the Seven Sisters of Army and Defense universities in China. Therefore, high risk programs. And so to do a big jump cut, when we see the level of technology that's being used by Israel against Iran in the war that broke out, Thursday night for us in the West. The level of activity from Chinese students in North American universities that can be dual use weapons. So we're talking AI, drones, anything you can think of. China is sucking that out of Canada and the United States right now in programs similar to the agro-terror sort of allegation program at U Michigan.
So much there. Okay, so first thing, I read into this pathogen a little bit, this fungus. And so, yes, the fungus can be dispersed to destroy wheat and crops. But from what I've read, there's also a neurotoxic element to it as well, and just a generally toxic element that is hazardous to human beings. So for people listening, and Sam, you'll know this, but this is very this is part and parcel of the way China operates, right? Like when we think of war, we think of bombs and guns and death and trenches and tanks. But the way China is engaging in war in the modern day is that it's multi-pronged, and that it's not. China's never been a big kinetic war nation. They were invaded multiple times by Japan and other countries and fell multiple times. So they are very much like an incognito spy war, hybrid war type nation. So yes, when we're talking about war with China, we're talking about something like this, the release of a fungus, within the United States and Canada to destroy us from the inside out, right?
Yeah, they don't want a direct kinetic conflict with the United States. The people that I've been talking to years have said they're already at war with North America, using the city of Vancouver egregiously in hybrid warfare. So that would include fentanyl, money laundering, deep infiltration of Vancouver's critical infrastructure from encryption technology companies used by China, Iran, and Mexican cartels, very closely related to the money laundering and drug trafficking networks, to deep access to Vancouver's shipping and ports. That's one aspect. And the biological aspects, absolutely. They don't want to do more than, I think at this point, at least the next 10, 20 years, jump around the Indo-Pacific and take over islands. And they want the rest of, meaning the United States, the rest of the free world, to say, okay, we're going to let go. We won't get kinetic. They won't go further. They want to do that and have in their back pocket the ability, if we do go kinetic, to release things, like you're talking about, or to shut off our internet, to turn on TikTok so that, everyone under the age of 30, maybe 40 now is saying that, China good, US bad, we shouldn't help Taiwan. And on the biological aspect, absolutely. There's FBI unsealed indictments in recent years that say the Ministry of State Security using hackers has been deep into our top institutions for a long time, but especially in the past 2 years and during the pandemic, sucking out information about how the West medically was responding to to COVID-19. That's just one example. Again, let me make it very clear: any information that I have from intelligence sources at a high and credible level is there's no information that COVID-19 was uh, intentionally released. Everyone that I know says it was an accident, and then it was weaponized, studied, covered up, right? But it looks like they were working on a potential bioweapon, and so that's what makes the U Michigan case relevant. That's what makes what we do and don't know about the Winnipeg Lab case relevant, and that's how they operate. Definitely, I'll add one thing. I heard directly, from some high level Canadian intelligence saying that China is deep inside some of our more infiltrated cities into our hospitals, gathering medical information, and how they can use that in terms of, I believe, pathogens and responses and ways that things can be weaponized.
Yeah, and that, basically what we have to do is we have to change our perception of war and the way that war is conducted. It's a different game now. It's not, world. When we think of war generally, I think most people in the world think of World War II. And at that time, Germany was the most mechanized country on earth. When their panzers first showed up, the Russians and the Americans had no idea how to deal with that problem. So by comparison today, that those Panzer tanks wouldn't last a day with the technology that is available to third-rate nations now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with good intelligence, good covert operations, and drones and ingenuity, I mean, any nation that wants to do something can do something extreme, And then when we're talking about the top level nations, as we're seeing with Israel, Iran, it's just incredible where the warfare is. But to your point, a lot of people, slowly people over the past year or two have been talking about, we don't want to get into a Cold War situation between the United States and China. And the people, I believe, that know say we're not getting into a Cold War. We're already in a type of war.
Yeah.
We're already there. And so, I mean, what more needs to be said? I think we agree on that point.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those situations where we're not going to realize we were in a war until the war is over. And if we're the ones who don't know we're in a war and we're fighting a war, then there's a chance we might not win that war.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the scary part here, like with the Winnipeg Lab case, so I've done quite a bit of reading on the COVID-19 virus, and there are elements of the Ebola virus that were spliced into and in the genetic sequence of the COVID-19 virus. And
that could be consistent with, bad lab practices and like stuff leaking into, or of course it could be intentional. And again, I'll listen to what you say, but there's so much going on that we don't know. And there's, what has been released. I have to believe there's a lot more at a classified level in terms of what they really were up to over there.
And this is pure speculation, right? Just not to sully the good name of Sam Cooper here when I say this, but at this point in time, so much of our world is constructed out of narratives. I'm writing an essay right now about how it's so difficult to find information, right? Like literally Sam Cooper and Matt Taibbi, Michael Schellenberger, and Glenn Greenwald are the only people I read or listen to anymore, because there is clear bias and clear agenda in everything else that I read or see. And you guys are all human beings. You're human beings with flaws. You have your own blind spots, right? But you are as unbiased and as professional as a journalist can be. And I'm sure that when you're writing, you recognize your own blind spots and try to work through them, right?
Yeah, and getting back to our earlier point, there's a few in that list that I wouldn't even agree with myself,
Right.
but I support your intellectual freedom to look around the world and read, who you think is getting after it.
Right. But the point is this, is that we are in this war of narratives, where narratives control everything. They construct the world around us. And so everything that has come down from, on high, the establishment, whatever that is anymore, the media and political merger, right? It's always something that has been constructed rather than what is actual fact. And so we've been left to speculate for the most part, because not everybody is Sam Cooper. Not everybody has access to, intelligence agents who are like, calling you on the bat phone and giving you top secret information that they can release. Right. Mm-hmm. And like you said, there's probably mountains of things that they know that they can't share with you or anyone else because of national security reasons and potentially compromising that. So all we have left is speculation. And so when you look at this Winnipeg Lab story, what we know, this lady was shipping Ebola viruses to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And then the COVID-19 virus, upon further, once isolated and examined, has elements of the Ebola virus in it. So that all we can do is draw links there. There's nothing else. There's nothing else we can do other than speculate, right?
Yeah, we can take what I can help with there is, again, everything I gather from people that tell me they know, but they have certain things they could share with me. For example, I cited Dr. David Asher, who was very, very early pressing the US government to release more, and very early suggesting to me, along with some in Canada, that President Donald Trump was right when he said he knew it came from a lab. People like that said, yeah, Dr. Chu wasn't directly working on the bat virus, but was directly working on weaponizing Ebola. And then you look at the record, as I've done, rigorously in some of my reports, and you can see her studies with Major General Chen Wei, the highest level, PLA bioweapon defense researcher, who we now know, because it's in Canadian intelligence documents that I pieced together, is at the highest level of bioweapon research and weaponization. and this Canadian, or, Dr. Chu Zhangguo, was working with her in papers from 2012, right? So, yeah, you piece that all together, and from what you say about indications that certain different things were spliced together that shouldn't be, unless, it's accidental or worse. And I think I would agree with you. It could be worse. Could something like that have happened in the Winnipeg lab that we don't know about? It's possible. There's nothing to suggest that, but from the Canadian government's extreme reaction on covering up what happened in the lab, fighting disclosure in court, and accusing anyone that raised serious questions of anti-Asian racism, all of that to me suggests a good possibility that there's worse things that came out of the Winnipeg lab and worse activities in the Winnipeg lab than we know of. I think there's a reasonable chance of that.
Or what are even the possibilities that those Ebola samples are sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is where they were sent, and then those Ebola viruses, or elements of such, are spliced into the genetic sequence of the COVID-19 virus? Like,
it's possible. It's possible.
And that's the thing, is you and I are left to sit here and speculate. Maybe we should get out of this territory before I destroy your credibility forever. But
these are reasonable questions based on what was covered up, and no one one credible at this point is saying that there wasn't a huge cover-up, and still many remaining questions.
So let's talk about that cover up. Sam, can you tell us, what are the indications of the cover up that you found when you were reporting this story?
The main thing, I mean, on a personal level, being, in a major media company, there was extreme, I would say, pressure, both directly and indirectly, from the start, not to ask certain questions or risk falling into disinformation that would panic the population. And so you can take that in many different areas, right? Could it panic the population into saying, hey, why is the government of Canada not shutting down our airports? Is that not a valid response as we, to potentially give us more, health security? Or, and I don't even, I'm like so reticent because I haven't looked into other major, let's call them other major health questions. But there was, government was acting on, at least we took it on good faith that they were acting on what we thought they knew. This was pretty accidental, and it could have come from it looked like it came from a wet market. So certain decisions for the population seemed to flow from that. Those are questions still in my mind, but what is clear and indisputable is that the Chinese Communist Party covered up what was going in Wuhan. We don't even have to say they covered up what came out of the lab or what maybe occurred naturally in a wet market. They covered up the seriousness of the virus and how it was lethal in their populations. And they covered that up to the rest of the world. So that is a non-disputable weeks or months cover up of what was happening inside China. And by covering that up, it lets the virus, through various means, spread around the world. And at the same time, as I reported and got attacked for, while this cover up was occurring, China was using United Front networks in Western cities to take away PPE, safety masks, and take them back to China. And so that all kinds of death, destruction, and misinformation stemmed out of those, core cover-ups.
Yeah.
And now we know the big other one is that Western intelligence agencies, the major ones, Britain, Germany, the Five Eyes, so US, Canada, Australia, from early 2020, there are strong assessments. Some of these are on documented now. So Britain, Germany, we now know the United States. These are the countries that have come out and said, here's records showing that we strongly believe or know or assess that this is a product of the Wuhan lab. And this was covered up from the population, while all these major social, economic questions are being debated in our societies.
Yeah. And on our side with the Winnipeg Lab, was there evidence of a cover up there with what was happening with those Chinese scientists and their shipping of, dangerous viruses like Ebola to the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Was there an attempt to cover that story up by the Canadian government and Canadian press?
I mean, certainly in my own experience, I just looked at this the other day because I was doing, a podcast with an American company, and I went back through my records of, emails from Dr. Chu and various Health Canada officials. And I believe in my questions, if you want to put it this way, I was asking questions in early 2020 in terms of why is, Dr. Teresa Tam approving Dr. Zhang Q to travel to this dodgy institute in northern China, I believe it was, should be like 2018, 2019. Can you give me an explanation? Of course, they wouldn't answer anything. Or why is Dr. Chu sending an email to her boss saying, we really, I'm paraphrasing a little, we really need to get this Ebola sample to Wuhan I was told that the phrase "the crown doesn't regulate the crown." If we tell this other agency that, then we're not going to be slowed down or impeded. All of these emails to me were highly suspicious. There were certain records of, Dr. Chu traveling to various conferences in China. I even found one of the conferences, there's there's international scientists online commenting and going, "This is a scam conference. I went there and we never even had presentations," right? So I
Right.
did all my research and could see where she was traveling, how she was communicating. It was just highly suspicious. I was asking, did gain of function research happen in Winnipeg? Certain certain elements were released, like, why did Dr. Chu have a patent on like Marburg virus, all this stuff. And they covered it up hugely. With Health Canada knew what was going on, the RCMP knew what was going on. CSIS, as I reported, and we now know from disclosures, had warned that Dr. Chu and students and her husband were up to no good back in 2018, before she sends the Ebola out in 2019, right? So obviously there was a cover up inside Canada's government and to the media, who get certain documents through freedom of information law. But to sum up here, when I look back at my notes, I even said, why is she on a research paper with this guy who's in China, reportedly in China's bioweapon program at this high-level institute in Jilin? In other words, I had, through looking just open source into her research papers in early 2020, I connected her to people in the bioweapon program, which is the exact same thing that CSIS documents that had to later be disclosed laid out with more detail and more damning evidence. So yeah, to me it was covered up because I was asking all the right questions and basically had the theory laid out of what she was involved in and who she was involved in. I mean, even you could find her at a conference in Wuhan in 2019 with the Batwoman, Dr. Shi, Ralph Barrick, Peter Daszak standing in a photo, right? And again, this is information that it was suspicious at the time, and later it comes out that these are the exact people that CSIS and FBI, everyone knows was in on this.
See, and for everybody listening, I'm sorry, my window is open here, so if you can hear trucks rolling by, it's insanely humid out here today, and I had to open a window. But okay, I get it. As a journalist, Sam, you can't. All you can do is connect the dots. You can't draw a conclusion because there's nothing definitive there, right?
Yeah.
But for me, as a non-journalist, as just your resident tinfoil hat guy, you're basically walking in on your wife in bed with another guy and going, well, I didn't see penetration, so I don't know exactly what happened. Like, that's how this feels to me, right? It's like, come on, man. Like what else do we need at this point? And look, Sam, I get it. As a journalist, you are committed to the utmost integrity, and that's to upholding your integrity. And so that's why the Bureau is what it is. But as an outside observer, I look at this stuff, Sam, and I'm like, how are we not drawing these parallels?
Yeah,
right?
you look at it and you go, it's when you go, everyone, we're ingrained with the natural ability to sense bullshit and to question people and go, come on. So
Right.
yeah, when you look at that, you can even read the emails between Health Canada people, and one manager goes about, redacted names from Wuhan emailing with Dr. Chu about this stuff. How did we get involved with these people? This is approved. Okay. I mean, I guess it's approved. I can't stop it. And I think the email was basically like, I hope this is safe, this kind of thing.
It's just crazy, right?
And there's people these people, as far as I know, the two the husband and wife agents that escaped back to China are the only ones, or were let go. We don't know. Obviously, I mean, I don't even want to get into it, right? It's just, I'm saying your instinct to say, come on, yeah, there's more than enough to say that, yeah, there's big cover-ups that are still going on and there's no accountability.
Yeah, look, man, I'm a parent of a teenager. My investigative skills are always top notch.
Yeah.
This is like, I don't know, man. And What drives me crazy is on the Canadian end. It's like we are the perfect, partner in this abusive relationship, because we'll just keep taking whatever China gives us. We'll just keep taking it, right?
Yeah, there's too many people that are that. They're either naive, meek, sheepish, and they take it. And then there's people, as I'm told by US government sources for a long time, people at high levels have said Canada is CCP central in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
So there's enough powerful people uh, that are in on it and know how to, manipulate the more sheepish people in government and media and everyone that doesn't have the time to, dig into this stuff.
Okay, so let's move on here, Sam, because I can just hear it in your voice that you're exhausted. You're cranking out as many stories as possible as the world collapses around us, and I know you're tired. So let's conclude on Iran, because I think this is an area where you and I may have differing viewpoints. Israel launched what they're calling a preemptive attack on Iran last night. So today is Friday, June 13th. Everybody's watching this a few days later. Sam, break this down for us. What happened, what's going on, and why the preemptive strike?
Yeah, Israel says that, as they've been saying for a long time, that Iran was, very close to actual nuclear weapon production. And so as everyone listening to this, because they're very attuned people will know, President Trump has made it sort of a cornerstone of his policy that he was going to secure a deal with Iran to, step directly away from their nuclear program, and that those negotiations were ongoing. And the U.S. government was indicating, you got the sense over the past week that Israel was getting very close to something, some sort of strike, to the point where the U.S. government pulled all non-essential or staff in the Middle East and said, you can come away. It's getting very hot there. And it emerged that there's been an operation planned for about 8 months, incredibly sophisticated cyber, air war, ground war with Mossad operatives keying in on senior Iranian leaders. And I think some of the most damaging activity in the strike was killing Iranian military commanders through ground level missile strikes by Mossad operators, while all these weapons that we don't even know or understand are hitting Iran's main nuclear enrichment facility. So the level of penetration, as I was watching it unfold at night, it became pretty clear within an hour or two that Iran didn't have a response. Their leadership and their military assets and defenses at the highest levels were taken out.
Yeah.
And so what does that bring in geopolitically? I wrote a story upon waking up on the morning of the strike, laying out that the three major moving pieces in the world that are bringing us closer to the Third World War scenario, where I and you are saying we're already, in a way, in a sort of a global conflict. So the Middle East, Iran, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, and China and Taiwan, those three moving pieces, the US government is trying to very carefully negotiate the world so that they can focus on what they see as the main threat, China and Taiwan. That is the only, that's their focus. And so what does the Israel attack raise last, as it was emerging? I think you could, the dust has not settled yet, but there's I think probably great nervousness in the U.S. government that they wouldn't achieve the success they did. I could be wrong. The U.S. government may know a lot more than it looked like at the start. But upon waking up, President Trump essentially says this was an excellent result and it's going to get worse. So Iran, make a deal, or your regime is going to be wiped out, basically. And that's where we are.
It's so scary because the moving pieces are the scary part. It's not Iran necessarily, although Iran is a dangerous nation to be poking. But this is a third world war type of scenario. And, the term World War III gets thrown around a lot. With every conflict, World War III gets dragged into the discussion. And I think it's because there is this existential fear of repeating the First and Second World Wars. I mean, it's always in the back of our minds for anybody who knows anything about those wars. I mean, especially the first one, they are gruesome, bloody, everybody dies, smoking craters everywhere. And here in North America, we are lucky because we are separated by 3 oceans, the Arctic, Pacific, and Atlantic Ocean. It's very difficult to get to us, but there is a high potential now, as you and I discussed, with the technological advancements, that those wars could arrive here. If we were to enter into a third global war, that war could arrive in North America. We could end up dealing with something here. So, I think this is something that needs to be on everybody's mind. And, look, I know Israel as a subject of conversation is a very polarizing one. I get that. And I am neither pro or anti. I understand all of the arguments, but at this stage, look, there's no way that Israel could have pulled this off without United States backing, without US backing. There's no way. They need US weapon systems. They need US money to do it. This is an American.
Trump said they've got the most lethal weapons in the world from the United States. They know how to use them, and they're going to get more. So yeah, to me, in my view, and we may have very different views, Iran, China, and Russia are all together. Whether they're together in that's one side, NATO is the other, and Israel is a big moving piece that is not NATO, but maybe doing something that that helps NATO. Like I say, incredibly complex, but I do think that very clearly, Iran, Russia, and China are working together. And that, to your point, that's what brings, I think, the moving parts that could take us into a situation where my mind is like stretching back to our last election and all the rhetoric from President Trump. We talked about how the world is a lot more dangerous than most people recognize. And I think this is where we are now. Where do we go from here?
And so in this scenario, right, because now we're talking from a bird's eye view geopolitical perspective. And Sam, don't worry, I'm gonna let you go in 10 minutes so you can take a nap, take a break and a breather. But I saw you with Yanya Kellick the other day, and I'm like, man, Sam is working overtime, so I don't want to burn you out too hard here.
On different projects.
Yeah. So from a geopolitical viewpoint, who do you view as being the aggressors in this scenario? Like, see, that's kind of where I'm stuck, because we look back in time, Russia, the Soviet Union's position in World War II is a very interesting one, because they are just as brutal, if not brutal, as Hitler and the Nazis to their own people and surrounding, Baltic states, Ukraine, so on and so forth. But they're on the right side of history. And so they're this dual player where they're this brutal totalitarian regime. Churchill and Roosevelt are very trepidatious, Churchill specifically, about dealing with Stalin on any level, but they need him. Russia, really, if you look back in history, Russia really did defeat the Nazis. And so where are we here in this scenario, in your view? Like, are we the good guys? Are we in that weird, gray area where we're good and bad? Are we the aggressors? Are they the aggressors? What?
I mean, how I clarify it for myself is, without even getting involved in the Middle Eastern peace, which is the most polarizing topic you could imagine, especially on our campuses and streets in North America at this moment. And that's exactly how I clarify it. I say, okay, even if I take the Middle East and all that hundreds and thousands of years of history out of the equation, even if I personally believe that Iran clandestinely and in hybrid war is using proxies all around Israel, and there's certain forces that will never accept Israel being existing there, and that is what I think is really driving this. I don't even need that. I would say, to a skeptical person, look at what Kash Patel said in Vancouver. The Chinese Communist Party, Russia, Iran, Mexican cartels are using Vancouver to basically, he said, attack our society with fentanyl. So I say if they're doing that on our shores and they're working together, then they're working together in the Middle East. And I do take a Western exceptionalist view and say, yeah, war is hell, but we're the good guys at the end of the day. And so that, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I think I'm right. That's why I just, that's why I break something that is just horrific and tragic down to that level.
Yeah.
And, yeah. I mean, that's all I can say. The dust isn't settling, and it won't settle for a long time.
And that's kind of how I feel too. Like, I do try to take a Western exceptionalist view on these things just because I'm here. But, like, I look at what's happened in Palestine, and I don't think that anybody can justify the carpet bombing and liquidation of millions of innocent people, no matter how you feel about them. But on that same level, like, if Iran is an aggressor and is allied with Russia and China, which they are, and are engaged in, sinister behavior like the distribution of fentanyl that is, killing millions of people in North America, right? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, eventually millions. Then I don't know. Should we respond, and what should that response be? And targeted airstrikes on military bunkers and installations and nuclear facilities purportedly might be the right response.
It could. There's Iranian people that are happy this morning, as strange as that sounds for people in North America. And again, I don't want to simplify hellish scenarios. Like, this is just the worst things in the world. And again, simplifying, it's like we talked about, people are withdrawn and distant from what happens in a World War II or World War I. And in a way, we can see what happened, with the raids from Hamas, and then the response, and what's happening worldwide, in the social response to all these atrocities, as that type of thing that you would expect in a global conflict. So I'm just like anyone else, scrambling to try to understand what's going on this morning. Again, people will listen to this, and this, I just woke up and tried to make sense of something incredible. I haven't, this would probably be, it could be the most consequential Middle Eastern action I certainly seen in 40 years, what we just saw.
I think it's important, Sam, I'm going to let you go in a minute here because I know you're tired, man. I think it's important, though, that we really strongly iterate that this is the most consequential action in the Middle East of our lifetimes.
Feels like it. I think it is. Yeah.
It feels like it to me too, because Iran is a place that Iran isn't Iraq. It's not Libya. It's not Afghanistan. It's not Sudan. It's a different beast. And look, everybody
would be global hegemon, and
exactly. And everybody knows that if you poke that bear, you're going to get a response. And the fact that they haven't, I feel like there is the probability for a devastating volley back toward Israel or somewhere else is highly likely at this point.
Yeah, and on the other hand, it's stunning how it didn't happen. Last night for us when it broke out, indicating just like how devastating and well planned that first strike was. So we will see.
We'll see. Who knows? Maybe when this episode premieres, the world will already be over.
That takes me back to like a philosophy class. That was, maybe it's all a dream. We're not even.
And on that note, man, your email ping just went off, so I'm sure there's something else happening.
Consequential.
Dude, I feel so bad for you. I love you, Sam Cooper.
I'm about to be in Europe for a week with some well-planned stories to come out to keep people tided. So
well, there it is.
All good.
Yes, a well-deserved and well-earned vacation. Sam, my brother, get some rest, man. I know. I mean, it's a crazy world, and my job is to speculate. Your job is to get the facts, and that's why, as you can see, I have slept well, and Sam has not slept at all. Oh man, do you look back on your choices in life sometimes and wonder what led you here?
I do, and on my bike this morning, I was thinking about that, and then again, as I've told you, I thought about I'll just get a little philosophical and romantic here, but I thought about my father being born out west, sent to probably one of the most elite private schools in the world in Switzerland, ditching that education and those connections and becoming a Christian minister, and then teaching me from both sides of where he came from, me taking my education and those values. And that's what I'm doing now in here. Right. And yeah, it does take away from my sleep at times.
It's pretty amazing how it all comes together. Right. And, I was thinking about it this morning. One of the greatest songwriters ever in human history died 2 days ago, Brian Wilson. People, if you've never listened to Pet Sounds start to finish, you need to. It'll change your life.
Yeah.
How symbolic that the greatest writer of love songs, he called Pet Sounds a teenage symphony to God. Dies days before this happens. Just the symbolism is not lost on me.
You go.
All right, Sam, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, go to the bureau.news, and next time we'll tell your wife I'm glad she's wearing your hat that you bought from me.
I was gonna say, yeah, if you see her at the grocery store, it's a reminder to go to the bureau.news, sign up as a paid subscriber. Also, follow Sam on X at Scooper Cooper. You will become a habitual refresher of his feed, as am I. I spend most of my time just refreshing Sam's X feed. And yeah, if you sign up at the Bureau, I probably already said this, but I'll say it again. Sign up as a paid subscriber, guys. Keep this boat rolling. Get Sam out of the closet. Not figuratively, literally.
The bunker.
The bunker. Get Sam out of the bunker. All right, man. Listen, I'm going to let you take some rest. Enjoy your vacation, brother, and we will be back as soon as you're back in town. I'm sure a million different things will have happened by then, and we'll have a whole new track.
Enjoy your summer. We'll talk soon.
All right, brother.
Bye.